Please pray with me. Spirit, we thank you for these special moments together. Minister to us, your people. May only truth be spoken, may only truth be heard, we ask. Amen. We're all familiar with the expression and probably know somebody it applies to when we say, they're kind of hard on the outside, but they're soft teddy bears inside. And when people come into an organization, maybe a new employee at work, you might say, hey, now, Jamie there, he seems kind of tough, but really he's a teddy bear inside, so don't get put off, right? Or we might warn a in-law when they come into the family, I think years past, people might have said that about me, although I've been working at being a little less crusty on the outside, right? But it's good to be soft on the inside in our emotions and in our generosity and our concern for one another. And as I say, but it's also good to get softer on the outside. Now, this past week, there was a funeral for an American congressman by the name of John Lewis. It was televised. Maybe some of you saw it. John was one of the great civil rights leaders of the past century, and he was a Christian pastor. And he played with that phrase, hard on the outside and soft on the inside, by also saying that we also need to be soft on the outside and hard on the inside. By soft, he meant that we need to work on being approachable and kindly and a good listener. But by hard on the inside, he meant that we need to live lives that are fixed in some values that will stay us through the tough times of life. And I'm inspired by you, the congregation here at Mount Zion, and the folks at Trinity. It's such a privilege to be a pastor because you often share your stories with me, and I know a little bit of some of the struggles and challenges you've gone through in your lives. And I'm inspired by how you've had these values that you've just been hardened into, values of responsibility and doing your best and doing your duty and finding the ability to have hope when terrible things happen. I mean, so many people in our congregations have lost a child, struggling with health issues, dealing with pain on an ongoing basis, struggling with mental health, struggling with financial issues, and yet people who are part of a positive community of faith and who really claim those values of love and kindness and faith, it's amazing how it sees us through the tough times. John himself was a soft-spoken gentleman, more often than not, speaking with a smile on his face. And his two most quoted lines were, "Get into some good trouble." And what he meant by that is, if you see that somebody's not being treated well, or you see that something's not right, and you can say something about it or have some influence, get into some good trouble. But then, of course, to be able to do that, we got to be soft on the outside and hard on the inside, which was his other famous phrase. And I see those qualities in you. Those qualities are seen in our volunteering. I mentioned our hospitality people tonight, working to get out probably 150 or more meals during this COVID time and delivering them to people who really appreciate them and need them. These values that we live out are innate within us. Somebody asked me this week, do you think they're innate or learned? And of course, I think it's both. But I think to be a human is to be humane. That's where that word human comes from. And I think that we're born with this deep, profound desire to be in connection because our very first life is in a womb of connection, isn't it, in our mums? And so deep inside us, we long for goodness and love and care and peace. It's essential to who we are. And our poem in the Psalm talks about that. Oh, Lord, how sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the cosmos. You have set your glory in the heavens. When I look at the heavens, the work of your fingers, The moon and the stars you have established, I wonder and marvel. Oh, take some moments to wonder. Take some moments to marvel. I was up to Temagami a few weeks ago and just laying on that dock again, marveling at stars that you never know are there in the city. But it's just like being in a planetarium. And to think, we're a part of that. We're all connected to that magic, to that mystery. And the psalmist goes on, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? You have made us your children. You care for us, children of the human one. The essence of our spiritual life is our connection to creation, our connection to our cosmic mother and father. The magic and mystery that creates life, evolves life, and sustains life includes us in our lives. When I get a bit stressed, I do what Jesus says. Look at the flowers. They're not wondering what they should be or what they should do or worrying that they're not as pretty as the flower beside them. No, just accepting our place as lovingly made by this amazing Creator. I heard an interview with a scientist, Francis Collins. Whoops, I'm losing my thingamajig here. Getting used to the new technologies, eh? All right. I think we're all right. He written a book and he was being interviewed, and he was the scientist who took over from Fred Sanger the Human Genome Project and worked with scientists literally around the world to map the entire gene map of the human being. Amazing. They now can map all the different genes that make up our DNA. And by graduate school, he told the story, he'd become an atheist. Wasn't impressed with what he was hearing in his church and the hypocrisy he saw. That just didn't make sense to him. But in time, he actually became a person of faith again. The first experience was someone in the hospital. He was working in the hospital, and one of the patients there was so kind, was so thoughtful, was so articulate that it put a crack in this fella's feeling that life is no more than physical realities. And then working and seeing in his daily work of pure science the magnificence of evolution in the cosmos. And then finally he took a trip once to the Cascade Mountains where he was captivated in awe and wonder at a frozen waterfall. And it just enabled him to take a leap of faith and say, yes, it's harder for me to believe that this is just all random physical realities and that there's not spiritual presence that longs for diversity in relationship and that mysteriously is growing and evolving as we grow and evolve. And interestingly enough, he was a close personal friend of the famous atheist Christopher Hitchens, which goes to show the relationships are not based on agreeing on things, they're based on how we treat each other and how we care for one another. Like Francis Collins, the psalmist looks around at our amazing creation, our complex ecosystem, and marvels in wonderment. Oh, that every child could grow up with the primary message that they have been born just who they need to be, that they are a part of a beautiful, amazing creation, and that really their only job is to be their best self. So many children grow up hearing they got to read better, dance better, play better, do something better, and they're given the message that they're not enough. And they get stressed out and depressed and angry. But the message, the good news we have to share with our children and with ourselves, because we didn't always learn this ourselves as children, just as a flower is created just as it needs to be, so are we. And we need to tend to that inner story that we can accept ourselves as gifts from God. You know, being involved in pure science and nature is such an important part of that. I'm so thankful that Claude headed up a garden that the Mount Zion community supported, and it's doing great. I came by, I couldn't believe it looked like the Garden of Eden out there, Claude. And I met Paula and her two kids, some neighbors. They were so delighted to have the garden. They were telling me all about it. I was just tickled pink. It was like everything that we'd hoped for. And one of our young adults here at Mount Zion wrote this: "Today I spent some time harvesting some stuff for my second salad mix this season and picking out the weeds. It's really delicious. For me, I find that our garden is a great place to de-stress and reflect, just like the psalmist." I added that part, just like the psalmist. "The garden helps me clear my mind and assists me on staying focused throughout my busy work weeks. It's a real blessing to have such a place to visit. All the garden work is done with help from one another. It truly is a real joy. I've been dying to try some basil someone gave me from her patch. I've removed a few tomato plants from my patch, and I'm going to grow them on my balcony at home. And if anybody wants some kale, I have plenty of it. You can take some, boil it like spinach, or mix it with a salad, but try not to eat too much by itself or you get an upset stomach. I'm going to enjoy more of this church-grown salad now. I hope everybody has a great week." Oh, getting in touch with the magic. That's our spirituality. That's what feeds our soul. That's what enables us to put up a barrier to the negativity and judgment around. And that's what's able to harden up our values so we can get into some good trouble every once in a while. As spiritual people, we have the opportunity and responsibility to identify all the experiences and stories that build us up, and to turn from those stories, some of the negative ones we've picked up, and just say no and create a new story for ourselves. I began creating a new story for myself when I was 29. I actually wrote it down. And whenever the negative thoughts would come, I'd say, no, I got a new story. And my new story was, I'm going to be a parent to that hurt little child in me. I'm going to let that child know he's all right, and that I don't have to be controlled by the pain of my past. And I just keep telling myself that story. I'm God's child. I'm good enough. And if other people don't think it, it's their problem. So you see, we work on our stories. We deepen our spirituality. But you know, we have to do it because we live in a world of such negativity, a world filled with experiences and messages of hate and judgment and meanness and violence. I wonder kind of why they teach the novel in high school. I think we've all had it, Lord of the Flies. It's such a negative view of humanity. You know, it's a bunch of kids who are marooned on an island, and before long they start fighting with each other, and then they end up killing one of the kids and torturing two others. It's just a nasty story. I'll tell you a better story, and it's actually a real story. I was reading about this island. It's off the island of Tonga in the Samoan Islands. And back during the slave trade times, a couple hundred years ago, the slave traders went to the island and they took all the adults and older young people, but they left children there. The children not only survived, but created a totally peaceful society. And 200 years later, the fellow who wrote this book visited that island and was just delighted to see a wonderful island of kind, caring, generous people. These are the realities we need to claim, because those in power who have agendas to control us, they're going to always feed us the fear story, and we mustn't allow the fear story to take root. Many of the world's most powerful leaders don't believe in equality. They believe in superiority. And in our capitalist system at the moment, the free market is spoken of as ultimate truth. They actually use that word. They worship the free market as if it's God. But then, of course, they don't want government involved until the market's in trouble, and then they're happy to take billions in grants and loans. Congressman John Lewis discovered the negativity in his world as a little child. He loved reading, and he went to his local library to get a book. And he was told very forcefully, black kids are not allowed to get books from this library. And so we had to walk 2 miles to a public library, where he also learned the value of, as a society, pooling our money through our governments to provide resources so that everyone can have the same opportunities. Many of us received messages growing up that told us that we weren't enough, that we didn't count, we were outsiders, less than some others in our family. Deep inside, when we hear those messages, we recoil. We get depressed, we get angry, because deep, deep inside we know they're not true. But they also scar us. And we have to begin to let them go and replace them with new messages. If we push children to achieve some goal of our own devising, we can cripple them. If we make them feel they have to be better than other people, we cripple them. If we ignore their individuality, we stunt their spirituality. Kids just need to be pushed to be their best and to do their best. That's the pathway to success. Congressman Lewis, as a child, found that inspiration from his church that proclaimed he was a child of God, that we all are, that we're all equal in the eyes of God. And he found it in the words of the U.S. Constitution that held that all humans are created equal with unalienable rights. And then he found an unalterable hope in the preaching of Martin Luther King Jr., who proclaimed that nonviolent resistance in the name of love is more powerful in the long run than violence and hate. Our psalmist today says an amazing thing. It should just fill us with hope. Listen to this. "O God, out of the mouths of babies and children, you have founded the means to silence cruelty and avenge the powerless." You know, the problems in the world seem big, but 1,000 years ago, they were even bigger. But each generation moves the world forward, because each generation learns more of that innate goodness that the Creator wants for all of us. What is particularly confusing and damaging, though, is that every religion teaches both. Every religion today has a big part of it that teaches us a negative story, that we're not good enough, that we're born in sin or born half-baked, or we need the approval of the priest or the minister or the imam or the rabbi. So much of that is what religion is about. But thankfully, there's always been the remnant, always been that part of every religion that understands that love is God and that we are born in love, out of love, for love. But you can see how these stories matter, because when Matthew Fox, a colleague of mine, one of the leading church historians in the world, when he wrote a book about 25 years ago, stating that originally the church was based in this understanding that we're all part of a blessed creation, not original sin, he was excommunicated by the past pope. So you see, these stories matter. And he not only lost the religion he was a part of, he lost the faith community that he had lived in as a priest, and he lost millions of dollars that he had brought into that community because he's published over 30 books. But when we get in trouble for believing in love, when we get in trouble for saying a positive story, when we get in trouble because we don't accept somebody else's hate, that's good trouble. Our psalm today grounds us in the good news that deep inside we are innately good. Deep inside we are born children of the human one. Deep inside we are children of God. Now, just a second again on this children of the human one, or son of man, as the old King James put it. It comes from Ezekiel, where God is pictured as the original human one. Think of that. We weren't taught that for the last 1,000 years. We were all taught that Jesus was the Son of God, and that comes from John's Gospel. But in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus' name for himself is Son of the Human One. He believed what Ezekiel taught, that mystery we call God is revealed in all humanity. In Ezekiel, God is the one who comes down, and we are children of the human one. The original human one is God's self. Wow. Isn't it incredible that the main name Jesus spoke of for himself, found over 100 times in the Gospels, we as Christians don't know anything about? There's a reason. The theologians don't want us thinking that way. They want us in fear. They want Jesus to be the other, the only begotten Son of God, the one that they get to mediate, whether we got Jesus in the right way so that we're all right. They don't want that. They want us to need the church like codependents. But Jesus chose his name, the same expression that the psalmist used, to accept this amazing reality that humanity at its best is divinity revealed. So let's continue to develop a spirituality that is rooted in stories that assure us that our best selves will always be enough, that we don't need to worry so much about others. We don't need to worry so much even about our children and our grandchildren. You know, what our children and grandchildren need the most is a healthy you and me, a non-anxious you and me. Our kids pick up anxiety just like we pick up radio waves on a radio. And when we can move deep in our spiritual lives so that our children and our grandchildren, when they're with us, despite whatever their problems, their hang-ups are, their messes, if our children and grandchildren can experience in us a peaceful, non-anxious presence, they will start to feel something inside that heals them. It will be a salve. It'll be a spiritual balm to them. And it will do more for them than any of our efforts and words. So let's be our best non-anxious selves, connecting to our identity, securing ourselves in the unending love story of a cosmos, steels us to overcome sadness with joy. Living in love by faith and with hope enables us to live with peace, joy, and gratitude, and makes us soft on the outside and hard enough on the inside to face every painful, difficult, challenging thing that comes our way. And so let us claim the goodness of God, and let us share the goodness of God as we are soft on the outside and hard in our values on the inside.